What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA show powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/All-NBA. I'm your host, Adam Mares. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler. Not doused in champagne. The Thunder don't drink champagne, but they did win the NBA championship last night in dominant fashion and in dramatic fashion. We're going to get into all of it. How you doing, Legs?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It was, listen, you crowned a champion last night. It was obviously you get to a game 7 of the NBA finals. It's incredible amount of anticipation. It was, of course, a horrific thing that happened to Tyrese Haliburton early in the game, which kind of just, it's a weird vibe to continue then through and then end up crowning somebody at the end when that's, clearly on everybody's mind. But look, I guess I'll start with this. The Oklahoma City Thunder were the best team in the NBA all season. They started off the best team. They kept it up all year. It's, I guess, fitting that they are the ones here at the end that are going to be hosting a parade because they were the best team in the league. And if you really look at the way they dominated the regular season, I don't know that it was necessarily really close or debatable all year. Their path to getting here, winning 2 game 7s along the way, was definitely challenging, but that's why they played all year to have home court advantage, and you get that game on your home court, and it definitely had a huge bearing on the game. So congrats to the Thunder, first of all, and I think a lot of people now, last year going to the conference finals wasn't enough to get into the people's consciousness about the Indiana Pacers. I think now people are there after 2 years of this conference finals and now a finals run, going to a game 7 on the road. The way that they did it, it's one of the most incredible postseason runs you'll see. Like so many improbable wins that they pulled out, just weren't able to do it on this last night of the season. But I think a lot more people have a lot of respect for their team and the way that they play, how well coached they are. So congrats to them as well. But this was the Thunder's night, and it seemed like this has been something that was destined to happen really probably since about December, if you really look at the way that the Thunder played all year.
I 100% agree. I think the Thunder are very worthy champions, and to your point, dominated the regular season and dominated good portions of the playoffs. They were pushed to 2 game 7s, but they overcame both of them, and were really impressive in the things that they did. So we're going to spend. There's a KD trade that happened. Nuggets just hired a GM. There's all kinds of rumors swirling. We're going to save all the other stuff for tomorrow's show. So today we're going to focus on the championship because you and I are both big believers that the reason for the entire league, for the entire sport, for the game is to crown a champion. So we're not going to let that other stuff seep into today's show. We'll save it for tomorrow. It'll still be worth talking about tomorrow. And yes, I think this is a rare example where the Pacers and Thunder kind of share the spotlight for what was a phenomenal finals. And that's kind of my first takeaway here is that last night's game, it was a good game for about 2.5 quarters, a really good game for about 2.5 quarters. And the series was great. And that'll be one of my lasting memories of all of this, was that this was a really well-played series. Not the biggest markets. And I think, fans were introduced to these two teams by like the broad, general sports audience was introduced to these two teams. But it was a great, well-played finals with really high level of play on both ends of the court. And that's the first thing. I mean, maybe the first thing I'll think about is the injury, but the first thing is this was very good hoops for basketball junkies.
Yeah, and it was, for people that really just love the purity of basketball, yes, this was a great series to break down. Going into it, you're excited because the style of play, what I liked about it so much as an analyst were the number of variables for each team. There's so many guys on a given night that could impact the game in a big way, not just the top of the roster. Like each team had 2 star players. and then a bunch of role players. But there were so many different guys that on a given night could have been the X factor and the tipping point in any game. That's for an analyst. That's what you want, man. You don't want to keep talking about the same thing, same people, game after game. So yeah, it had that. It had style of play. Both teams, their style of play is great. Oklahoma City's defense lends itself to great analysis the way that they play. Indiana's offense does. Again, the path to the seventh game was kind of bizarre. If you just look at some of the things that happened in this series, starting with Indiana stealing game one, right? Coming back from 15 down, the last 9 minutes of the game. Tyrese Haliburton hitting the game winner out of nowhere. I mean, there was such a state of shock around the league when that game ended. Did I just see what I just saw? The Indiana Pacers just won that game somehow. Now you're thinking, wow, now this is going to get really interesting. And then Oklahoma City, of course, getting that huge game 4 win, which was tight all the way down the stretch. I mean, they lose that game, they get a 3-1. I don't know they win this series. Nope. They made the plays at the end of that game they had to get it to 2-2. Then you get the blowout in game 6, but Indiana couldn't have played better. Oklahoma City couldn't hit the broadside of a barn shooting from the perimeter. And now you're thinking like, man, all these shooters got to carry all this baggage back to OKC for a game 7. Could they be less confident right now in their shooting ability? So that's set up last night. And then of course the Haliburton play happens, man. And it just changed everybody's focus on like the way you were viewing the game. You couldn't stop thinking about it. It's like a disgusting gut punch to everybody, not just Tyrese Haliburton and the Pacers, to everybody watching the series that wanted to see both of these teams fight it out to the end, full strength. And the way Haliburton started off, Adam, there's no telling what his night could have been. He's a different player when he's aggressive early and making shots. There's no telling what kind of night Tyrese Haliburton would have had and how many fewer turnovers the Pacers could have potentially had. So that's what we were kind of left with. Like, man, we just wanted to see it finish the way it should have. Both teams and all their guys out there and seeing if we could get some drama in the fourth quarter. But having said that, OKC used the same recipe they have used all year. In that third quarter, their defense suffocated Indiana offensively. They forced turnover after turnover. And unlike game 1, where they left the door open for the Pacers because they didn't convert into points, they turned all of those turnovers into points in the third quarter. Yeah. So all of a sudden, finally, everybody in that building last night could breathe. You could feel it. Like the tension eased once they got like a 9-point lead is really, to me, was like that was a 3 in transition. Jalen Williams hit it to go up 9. And it felt like everybody then could relax. And from that point on, the roof just got blown off the place the rest of the night. The crowd was incredible.
It did happen how it's happened so many times this year for the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is a run all at once, just a big haymaker that they hit you with. And you can feel oh my God, now we have to come back against this team, which again, Indiana has done all year. They've come back on teams and made these improbable runs, but it's so difficult to do. And when you're shorthanded, it just felt like in that moment, that was the punch. Let's break down the game just real quickly. So Haliburton gets off to the hot start. To your point, it's like, okay, that was line item number 1. You could not get off to a slow start on the road if you're the Indiana Pacers. He gets off to a hot start. The Pacers have pep in their step. He goes down, and it was, we're going to talk about it later, so I don't want to get into it too much right now, but he goes down, and it was the most eerie feeling, I think, in the world, because everybody knew coming into the game that was the risk, right? If he plays, and again, I think he should play, we'll get into it later, but if he plays, that's the one thing you're fearing. When it happened, it just felt like, oh my God, everybody in the entire world knew exactly what happened the moment it happened. But then the Pacers actually rallied, behind that. The whole first half, I actually thought it threw Oklahoma City off their game a little bit, maybe because it just changes the complexion. They're harder to attack when Haliburton's not on the floor. And I felt like the Thunder were actually stunned from that entire first half, and it was the Pacers who had the upper hand. Do you kind of agree with that after the injury, the eerie feeling that Oklahoma City was a little discombobulated, more so than the Indiana was?
Yeah, it felt like the letdown was more on the part of OKC a little bit. It was such a strange dynamic to add to the mix in this game. I thought Indiana obviously handled it very well the rest of that half. Nembhard hits the big step back late, and they take the lead into the half. Incredibly, they're up, And you're just kind of wondering, man, what's here, what's about to happen here? What happened in the third quarter? And look, you cannot say enough or overstate how well TJ McConnell played in this series. And he did it again last night. You know that they went a 12-minute stretch in this game and he was the only guy who was scoring? For over 12 minutes of playing time, TJ McConnell was the only guy scoring for the Pacers. It's incredible to even think about that. And again, I'll say it, if there's an all-league team, an all-finals team, not just a finals MVP, he's on the all-finals team. There's no question about that. But they turned up the heat on him in a big way with their pressure and size in the third quarter. He ended up with 7 turnovers. He had 3 or 4 of them in a very short period of time when that game was getting away from Indiana. The size on him, Dort started guarding him more than he had. And you could just see, like, it was very difficult. He was fighting over the screens that TJ McConnell was turning the corner on other guys and getting down into that for that little pull-up jumper or the stuff he likes to do along the baseline. Dort was cutting him off. They were forcing him further out on the floor. The passing, the amount of distance from pass to pass was getting extended, so guys were getting in passing lanes. And they really got to the point where they overwhelmed TJ McConnell as a ball handler playmaker. And they didn't know what to do with their offense. And that's what Oklahoma City is capable of doing to you, but they hadn't really done it to McConnell because primarily TJ McConnell had been, spelling Haliburton and out there really to score. I mean, that's what he's been doing better than anything in this series. And then these little pesky defensive plays he makes. But this was different. This was now, we need you to kind of get us organized offensively and let us stay in this game. And their possessions, if you look at the string of possessions they had for about a 5-minute stretch in that third quarter, I mean, it was as bad as it gets. There was just nothing to be had. Very difficult time even completing basic entry passes to the wing. So it was the one stretch where some of his limitations got exposed during that quarter. As great as he was, Oklahoma City was able to get into him, primarily him, not just him. Certainly they had 23 turnovers or something on the night. So it wasn't just him, but 7 turnovers for TJ McConnell. I don't know this. I'm guessing that's maybe his career high in turnovers. I didn't look that up, but I'd be shocked if he ever had more. So that to me was a huge part of it. They made him get a little bit uncomfortable with how he had to play. And they've just completely got worn down, man, got exhausted. And once it was a double-digit lead, you really didn't sense they were going to have the pop to come back.
There was one moment where I thought for a brief second, actually there was 2 moments that I thought really determined the game. One of them I think you're referencing. If you remember, I think this was third quarter, late third quarter. Shai kind of had an awkward play where it looked like he was about to pass and then turned it into a dribble. And then his eyes got real big. Like he thought maybe I just, carried it or what have it. He kind of looks around and then he throws it to Dort and Dort hit a 3. And that 3 pushed it to 7 points. And it was this huge moment because the game had been tight and that opened it up a little bit. And pretty soon the floodgates opened. That was the first turning point. And then the second one to me was late in the game. And I know this, I only had the thought for 30 seconds, Leg. The Pacers cut it to, I think, 11 points, 11 or 12, something like that. It had been as big as 20. They cut it to 12 with about 4.5 minutes to go. And I didn't think the Pacers were going to win, but it was the only second where I said, man, this does feel like what the Pacers do. You think they're out of it, and all of a sudden they make a late push, and they push it. But it lasted for about 15 seconds because OKC ended up scoring, getting a steal, scoring again, and so that was the end of it. But those were the only 2 moments where I thought, okay, those were the inflection points.
Well, it was, you're right, 91-79. So Mathurin scored on a layup, cut it to 12, 4:45 to go. Certainly plenty of time, especially what Indiana's done in this postseason. The difference, they did not have Tyrese Haliburton this time. Well, I wasn't thinking necessarily what you were. It didn't feel like that to me. It felt like they were holding on for dear life.
It was a drive-by thought. The thought just came for like 2-3 seconds, and then it was gone. As soon as
I think part of that thought probably was, and I think I felt this. Everybody probably did. You just wanted to see a dramatic finish. So you're thinking is there any way that they can get us to 3 minutes to go, and it's like 6-point game, and now Oklahoma City's feeling some pressure. We're not able to get there. The thing. Getting back to the Haliburton thing for a second. What was interesting about this situation? I spent 2.5 days between games doing a ton of media hits. his calf never came up once.
Really?
We didn't talk about it one time
Wow.
because of the way he looked in the previous game.
That's true. That's a good point.
So it gets to the point where you go, okay, I guess he's good to go. Like, this isn't a factor now. And it wasn't just the fact that, it wasn't like he had a monster game 6. He didn't need to because they played so well. They had a 30-point lead. He didn't need to really even play in the fourth quarter. But it was the plays he made, like the defensive plays he made.
He
Like
looked healthy.
he had some plays where he like got in the passing lane, deflected it, and then the one highlight play where he deflects it, jumps out of bounds to save the ball, throws it back in, and then sprints the left wing, and they get that 3-on-2 break where Nesmith hits his 3. They had the play where the no-look pass to Siakam for the dunk. The way he was moving, that let you think that, like, okay, for 2.5 days, I wasn't asked about it. And if I had been asked about it and all the media stuff I'd done, I probably would have started thinking about that again or mentioned it. Because I wasn't asked about it, I honestly stopped thinking about it, Adam.
Right.
So going into the game, you're thinking, like, I guess, it's not even a factor. And then he comes out, plays the way he does early. So now you're really put that to bed. And then that happens. And it's so similar to the Durant injury. It's incredible. But more sickening even, because at the time it happened, Durant had already won 2 titles. Kevin Durant, was a different stage of his career. And this team with Tyrese Haliburton at his age, and like this was their chance. Franchise had never won one, and here he is. And it goes down, and it was so similar, and it just made me think after the game. I'll tell you what, man, when you have calf strains going forward, and you hear guys, that's their diagnosis, I think teams are going to be so overly cautious now the other way. Like, you might have to let a guy be back and look perfectly normal in a gym and then add a month to his comeback because of what's happening here with the calf, and then it's connected in some way to this. Clearly, it's weakened. Clearly, there's a correlation.
Yeah, but everybody knew it too, though, Legs. And I want to save this discussion for a little bit later, but it is true that everybody knew it coming into this one, that was the risk. It's like, hey, man, he says he could play, he could do this or that, but what's at risk here is the worst injury, one of the worst injuries in sports. So I think everybody kind of knew it, and this was Game 7 of the finals. I think a guy's going to play through that. But
but I guess my bigger point, when we'll move on now, but my bigger point was just that, like, no one was talking about it at all.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So here he is. You think now you got 2 fully healthy teams. Like, here we go. Like, we're going to get, and it started out that way, the way he was playing. And I tell you what, there was an awful lot of, as you would imagine, a lot of tension in the building. But I will say this, that was by far the loudest pregame environment I've ever seen in my life. I mean, 20 minutes out, when those guys came out of the tunnel, both teams came out of that tunnel, how loud that building was, and it stayed that way all the way up until basically the national anthem. I've never seen anything like that. I was taking videos of it and stuff because I was like, wow, I've never heard anything like it. They were so ready to celebrate OKC having their first championship, and then that half plays out and they're down 1 at halftime. There was a lot of nervous energy in there that Oklahoma City erased in that third quarter, man. And then the fourth quarter was just kind of like a joyous celebration in the building is what it felt like. Even when Indiana made that little run to cut it from 20 to 12, I don't think anybody in the building was really worried about them being able to actually complete that comeback or make that really interesting late. So Oklahoma City kind of took the drama out of it in that third quarter.
They are as good a fan base as you'll get in sports, man. I mean, the only show in town in terms of professional sports, and those fans show out. You were giving them some love on the broadcast or the post game yesterday, and I think it is part of the story is that Oklahoma City fan base. And I always root for fan bases that have never got one. This was an example where both fan bases here, but I always root for it personally, and so it was cool to see him get it. If we now move on to the Thunder, this really was an impressive wire-to-wire season for them. And I think now that we kind of think about them in the big picture, they obviously can get better from here, and that's what's scary. We'll talk about that in a second. But I think when you look at what they accomplished in the regular season, just dominant, had an identity, they're selfless, They play hard every single night. They have incredible depth. They're extremely well coached. All of those things. And then they got into a playoffs. And I think the people that were skeptical about OKC, going into it, I think it was actually fair the way it played out, because 68 win teams don't often have 2 game 7s. And yet it was like they still had to come of age, and they had to do it in the playoffs, and they got pushed to their limits. And in both cases, they responded. They were down 2-1, which is a tough spot to be in 2 different series, and one on the road to keep their season alive. To me, that was a team that was talented enough to do it, but wasn't mature enough, and became mature enough through adversity throughout the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with that. And look, you got to go through those moments. Very, very young team. You got to go through some of those moments. That you're right. That's the way you sum that up. Those 2 wins, down 2-1 on the road for a game 4 in 2 different series, where, coming off of the previous game, you're thinking they could be in some real trouble here. And if they don't get it done somehow, they go down 3-1 in either series, they end up losing that series, whether it's the Denver series or this series, and you're going, okay, it's 2 years in a row, number 1 seed in the Western Conference. This year, number 1 seed overall, and they don't get it done. And so you're going, I'm not saying you're going to think they'll never break through, but certainly you're going to think like, okay, like they need to ripen more. And they were able, in both cases, that's about as deep as you have to dig to win close games on the road that are decided by a few possessions late to get the thing to 2-2. And then from that point on, you maintain home court. It becomes a best of 3 series, and 2 of them are going to be in your building. That's what they did in both of those series. The 2 real gut check moments of the postseason for them. I think they ended up on the year 84-21. Like, that was their record on the season, man. That's as dominant as you get. And those 2 moments are going to be really what defined their postseason run, being able to have those gut check wins where they had to make plays late on the road or they go down 3-1.
The other thing I'll think about this team, there's a lot of reasons I think they won. Their defense will probably be line item number 1. When I think back to this team, it'll be like that team just could defend like crazy. They had defenders all over the court. It wasn't one guy. And yet, Alex Caruso, to me, will also be the lasting memory of their defense. Like, if I think of it, if I whittle it down to one player, I think it'll be Caruso and how unique he was as a disruptor. But the truth is, they had guys 1 through 10 that come into the rotation that all do something productive on defense. And I don't remember the last time we saw a champion that had that. Who's their weak link? I don't think they have a single weak link in their entire rotation. And I don't remember the last time there was a team that didn't have at least one guy that was like, well, we have to cover for this guy.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Yeah, Caruso was like the perfect acquisition for them, and his toughness. Even early in the game last night, he hit a 3 that when he checked into the game, that was just, it felt important at the time because of the start that they had. He was incredible for them. There was an interesting series for some of these guys, like Jalen Williams. I will say last night, people were concerned about the way he looked early in the game. He looked a little uncomfortable,
a little nervous.
Yeah, absolutely. And even all the way up to halftime. You look at halftime, look at what he had done to that point in the game. When they got separation in the third quarter, and he helped get the separation too. I told you, he hit the big three to go up 9. He seemed to relax finally. When it didn't feel like every possession was the weight of the world, he was able to breathe a little bit. He started playing better from that point on. But people were a little concerned about him. And then he showed up and helped close that thing out. The guy that showed up last night, finally, who had a really rough series, but had a big impact last night, I felt, was Isaiah Hartenstein. He really wasn't a factor in this series. Very quiet. Did not look comfortable offensively. Was not getting any opportunities offensively at all. How many times did he release the Doves in this series? You don't recall him releasing the Doves one time.
I remember one. I do remember one, but that might be it.
One time. It felt like that was 2-3 times a night all season, and he just wasn't getting the opportunity. 7 points, 9 boards, 4 assists last night in only 18 minutes. He was a factor in the game last night. So he finishes the season on a high note. But the depth of this team, you're right, no weak links, egoless. That's the way I've always described them. And in Indiana, the same thing, an egoless team.
Yeah.
It's such a rare thing in sports. And you heard Dagnall talk about it a lot after the game. He talked about it on the stage. He talked about it on his interview with SVP. Talking about guys that really root for each other's success. And it can be a hard thing sometimes in pro sports because everybody's competing for minutes, shots, points, money, opportunities, accolades, all that stuff. They are just human nature for professional athletes, and they don't deal with that stuff. And so I thought that was a great point that he made. And then the line that Presti had, I think summed him up too. And Scott repeated this. He said, age is a number, maturity is a characteristic. And that's kind of how you sum up their team. Definitely poised beyond their years with the way they react to each other, how little maintenance they require on and off the floor is pretty remarkable for a group this age to become NBA champions.
I think it's the defining trait. So I go number one to the defense, right? And we just talked about that, the depth of defense. But I go to number two, I go to roster construction on this one, because it's not just that they have been able to assemble a team that is deeper than every other team in the NBA by a good amount, but also that the character of the team seems to match. And that's hard to do. I mean, when I always tell people, the more I've been covering the league now for 12 years, the more I'm around it, the more those things matter. Yes, it's hard to find the perfect pieces, and you get shooting and you get rebounding, you get all these different things. But then you just say, are they of the same character, the same types of guys that have the same goals and want to play the same way? The fact that they have a team that runs 10, 11 deep, and all of the guys seem to buy into the same core philosophy, to me that's the other thing that I think stands out about this Thunder team. They all want to defend collectively, and none of them seem to have an ego about, what am I leaving on the table personally to commit to this? And that it's rare, especially for a young team.
Well, you and I have talked about it several times about this team. I think for me, I would agree with you. The first thing you're going to think about 15, 20 years from now, when you think about, okay, the 2025 NBA champion Oklahoma City Thunder, the very first thing you're going to think about is their defense, because it wasn't just great. Yeah, it wasn't just great by they were the best defensive team in the league this year. They were one of the best defensive teams analytically that this league has seen in the last 30 years. So it was more than just, oh, wow, okay, by today's standards. No, this was a great defensive team, fully committed every night. Everybody seemingly on their roster wanted to play it. That's the first thing. I think the second thing I will think about is how well-defined their hierarchy is on their team and how accepting of where they slot each guy. It's not the easiest thing to get guys to buy into that. Sure, a lot of teams have a clearly defined best player, and everybody in the building knows that's the guy, and they kind of do what they want. They're treated a little differently, and they carry themselves a little differently. And you hold the charter up for an extra 8 minutes so they can get there. Like, we all know that. That's just part of it, right? But then a lot of times, the guys that are fighting for those next rungs on the ladder, sometimes there is it fluctuates night to night. I felt like with this team, they totally got it and they accept it. And it's a big part of why they have created what they have. Another thing Presti said last night, they made when they got here, when they arrived in Oklahoma City and they started building this team, they started approaching it like, we want to draft people, not players, people first. That is their priority. Sounds maybe corny and cliche. It's not. It's the same thing the Spurs did. They drafted character. Yeah. And obviously those guys had talent. Duncan and Parker and Ginobili had talent. Okay. But it's really about the character that they bring into the building every day and how easy it is to build out a roster around it when your best players have that kind of character. So that's kind of how I'll remember this team, man. They're just perfectly slotted. They accept their role on this team. And then their defense was just suffocating pretty much every night at some point in the game, which was going to be something they required and needed, and they fed off of. And they did it again last night. So it was almost fitting that it turned on their defense in the third quarter, because that's what they did all year.
The last thing I think that we'll remember about them is, of course, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, because The defense is consistent. It's phenomenal every single night. It's otherworldly. The roster construction, the culture building, those things I'm going to remember because this really was a team. But to win with that, even those two things don't get you a championship. Now you have to have a star who can also be consistent. And consistency is the name of the game for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. 23 playoff games for him. 16 of those he had between 29 and 40 points. It's not even like the high is that high. 40 points is a lot of points, but the fact that he just hits 30 points, 35 points, 33 points, 34 points every single night, you can count on him to get those points. He's just so consistent as a star player. And even last night, a bad shooting night, but he has 29 points, 12 assists. It's just when you have a guy that can give you that every single night and you have a defense, you knew what you were getting from the Thunder every game. I feel like they were within the same 10 percentile in terms of how they performed every single game in this playoffs.
Well, the thing about Shai is, and you talk to defenders all throughout the year. I talked to a lot of these top defenders on teams, and he was the guy that kept coming up as the most difficult individual cover in the league. And so when you have a guy like that there really is no answer for, the way that he can collapse your defense, the way that he can just get out of any situation with his handle, with his shiftiness, that mid-range shot, which is almost automatic. You're right. Even on nights when he doesn't shoot it well, he gets to his number, which is what you and I have talked about a lot. It changes the definition from a superstar to star. That's what the difference is. Stars have these nights where they fluctuate, and they have games like that where they're not as big a factor offensively. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander gets to his number because he gets to the line. And then last night, he has a career high in a playoff game with 12 assists. And you knew it was going to be a factor in the game. Now, they didn't shoot well from the three, but they made as many as Indiana did. That's all they needed to do. It's not like you need to shoot a great percentage, but you better make in the ballpark as many as the other team. Because if Indiana's got a 4 or 5 made three advantage, now you got a different game on your hands. So they made enough. A lot of those were on Shai kickouts because of the way he was collapsing the defense. They committed to him again last night. A lot of traffic. They weren't handing him off from one guy to the next. They were continuing to pursue him with the initial defender. So he was constantly faced with two defenders wherever he went, and he made the right play most of the night. And then he's got that ultimate weapon as well. He gets to the line, and people, I know some people in this chat even, they hate that. Oh, they think that he's getting the benefit out of these whistles. He's drawing fouls, man. Well, there's a lot of great players in the league that do that. He's really good at it, and it adds to his total every night. So when the nights we didn't shoot well, he could control the game that way. And last night he did it as a facilitator, as well as a guy that was able to get to the line so they could set their half-court defense. So, look, it was a historic year, a regular season MVP, finals MVP, title, and scoring champion all in the same year. That's a hell of a year, man. That's a hell of a year that one guy could have. And with his age, this is going to go on for a while, I think, with him, certainly as the league's leading scorer. Not going to be shocked if he repeats that next year at least.
All right, well, let's take our first break. On the other side, I do want to break down the Haliburton injury as well as what this means for the Pacers, what it means for the East. And then later on in the show, I want to ask, we've been thinking that teams, the last couple championships were primed for a repeat. But the Thunder, where do they rank in terms of where you expect a repeat now following this championship? We'll get to that on the other side. First, let me tell you guys about Vivid Seats. The NBA playoffs are now over, but there's still time to experience the intensity of sports, baseball season, as well as any live events going on throughout the summer with Vivid Seats. Vivid Seats is the best place to get tickets to any game or show. They have the best selection of seats, 100% buyer guarantee, and they're the only ticket marketplace that rewards you for every single purchase. For a limited time, our listeners can use the promo code ALLNBA30 to receive $30 off their first Vivid Seats purchase of $300 or more. Just click the link in the show notes and download the Vivid Seats app and use promo code ALLNBA30 for $30 off of your first $300 purchase. When it comes to sports or live events, being there is all that matters, so experience it live with Vivid Seats. Also want to tell you guys about Monarch Money. Finances can be messy and confusing. Monarch Money acts like your personal CFO right in your pocket, giving you full visibility and control so you can stop earning and start growing. It's more than your average budgeting app, although it is that as well. Monarch Money is a complete financial command center for all of your accounts, investments, and goals. Don't just manage your money, start building wealth with 50% off your first year for our listeners. It has a really good interface that makes it easy for you to track all that's going on with your investments. Are the markets up or down? What's going on in your portfolios? Or is everything tracking the way you expect it? Do you want to move some money around? Sometimes that can take, you have to plan a whole day or a whole week because I have to sit down and look at these things and go over it and kind of check where everything's at. This app has this interface so that it tracks everything in ways that are very easy to sort through. It also is a great budgeting app for you to really understand where you're spending your money, where your money's coming in from, where it's going out to, so you can pick up trends on your own habits that maybe are, going under the radar for you. And that's one of the things I love about it. Nobody wants to spend a ton of time trying to over orchestrate their money. But on this app, you can really get everything from budgeting to your investments nice and sound. And it's obviously been, it's got that 4.9 rating with 30,000 five-star reviews. 30,000 is the big number here. That's a lot of people that are happy with this app. Get control of your overall finances with Monarch Money. Use the code ALLNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's for 50% off of your first year at monarchmoney.com with code ALLNBA. All right, we're back here, segment 2, me and Tim Legler. So here's where I want to start with this. You knew the injury was there. You said nobody was talking about it, but going into game 6, everybody was talking about this idea of, hey man, calf strain. That's what Damian Lillard said. He played through his calf strain, then he tore his Achilles. That's the big fear. And then I saw the take from a lot of people of he shouldn't be playing. The team should save him from himself. My thought, and I'm curious what you think of this. It's game 7 of the finals. I understand it's a huge risk. There's no such thing as saving a player from himself. 99% of professional athletes, in my opinion, would risk what Haliburton risked to win an NBA championship when it was 1 game or 2 games in this case. So to me, I don't relate at all to the people who say he should have never played. Even obviously in hindsight, we see he injured himself. But I just think athletes look at that and say, what is the point of all of this? To win a championship, I have a chance. Of course I'm going to risk it. It just ended up coming up bad. But what do you think about that criticism, that he should have not have played?
I 100% fully agree with you. And every athlete would think exactly the same way. And honestly, I feel like anybody who says that now, you're completely just, you're jumping on the fact that it actually happened and he tore it. And now you're going to be the expert and say that he shouldn't have played. Come on. The guy, I was shocked he looked as good as he did the other night in game 6. I was shocked by that. Because it looked like, this is dicey here. You watched him warm up before the game. He didn't do a whole lot of sudden movement before game 6. So I was really, really watching him, and he was making shots, at a high rate. So he's really in a good rhythm shooting, but he wasn't really moving quickly or explosively in any way. And I was thinking, man, how is he going to play and protect this thing? Like, how are they going to do that? Because the game of basketball requires you to accelerate sometimes, push off, burst, or else you can't get open. You can't guard guys. You're not a factor. And if you're not a factor, as he ended game 5 as a non-threat, and I said then, and I'll stick to it, he should have just gone back to TJ McConnell in that game, who was healthy and effective, because it was clear Tyrese Haliburton couldn't do anything offensively in game 5. So now I'm watching him game 6 and going, okay, the way he looks, I knew he wasn't 100%, but he was able to play as if he was. He had an impact in the game. He made some plays, as I mentioned, that required a lot of ground to cover, where he had to push off and make athletic plays. So you're thinking, all right, I guess he's feeling really good. And it was not talked about, man, at all leading up into game 7. So for anybody to now try to say, he never should have played, that's just kind of trying to be the genius after the fact. There's not a single player in the NBA that would have done exactly what Tyrese Haliburton did. But like I said before, Adam, I do think this is now a number of times that this has happened, and including on the highest profile stage there is. highest profile moment you could imagine. Game 7 of the NBA Finals. You're now looking at, I'm telling you, when these guys now have calf strains going forward, and it seems like the new in vogue injury. And it's like these injuries, like
Yeah.
for some reason, right? Each certain years, it's like the injury that's in vogue that year, right? Back in when I played, became plantar fasciitis. Started to like people started hearing that for the first time, and everybody in the league
Yeah.
was dealing with plantar fasciitis. It's been calf strains, a lot of calf strains, and I do think you're going to see teams now, man, really, really go overboard, exercising caution if a guy has a calf strain and how long they hold them out. So the league and the fans need to be prepared for that going
Yeah.
forward. And you really can't blame them based
Yeah.
on what we've seen play out right before our eyes.
And I think if this happened in the regular season, for sure, Haliburton is being very cautious with this. And to be honest with you, if this happens in round 2, maybe he doesn't play because you're so far away. But a game 7, you only have to
Yeah.
survive one game and get through it. So to me, it's just like athletes are going to take risks when they are that close to achieving their ultimate goal. And
For sure.
unfortunately, the downside of that risk is just so huge. And, so now he goes down. And this is one of those injuries. We saw it with Jason Tatum. This is one of those injuries where he's a young player and the recovery from this one is so long and you don't know what kind of guy, you're going to play or you're going to come back. Can you make a full recovery from this? Or are you always going to have a little limitation to you athletically? To me, that's why this is so devastating is this. The Thunder, the Pacers, I know they had to make some decisions, but to your point, they were ascending. They were this great story that was coming together and starting to believe and all these different things. And now you can pretty much throw out next year. Because I don't know how you expect yourself to win without your best player for an entire season. So that's what makes this so crazy is this might have just completely, in fact, almost certainly did end the entire Pacers era.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know if I'm willing to go that far. Couple things. I mean, you listen, nobody can predict what you're going to look like after an injury like this. We're going to sit back and we're going to wait and see. Jason Tatum's in the same boat. To what extent, if any, like, does it reduce what you are as a player? Tyrese Haliburton I will say, is not a guy that plays an explosive athletic game. He's more of a grounded player. His movements are a little bit more measured. The way that he plays, I think that gives me a little bit more optimism that I think he can come back close to what he is now. But to your point, like when you go conference finals and now you go finals and lose, you're thinking very much so that going into next year, if he doesn't get hurt, very much they're in the mix in the Eastern Conference. Now everybody's going to take them seriously from jump. And hey, maybe they make it back here next year because there's a lot of uncertainty in the Eastern Conference. This certainly derails thought of that next year. I don't think there's any question about that because it's impossible to envision. This is the end of June that he makes it back next season. He's not playing next year. It'll be the year after. So you're talking a year, 16 months from now, whatever it is, before we see Tyrese Haliburton again. I don't know that I'm willing to go as far as say, well, that's it for the Pacers and being relevant like in the Eastern Conference. I don't know that I believe that because
I just mean this team, though. This team, like 2 years is too long for you to know what's going to be consistent from this year to the next time he's on the court. There'll be so much turnover in the roster. Or you expect there to be that it'll be a different team. I'm not saying that he won't contend again, but this team will evolve too much by the time he's back to feel like it's the same team.
I mean, that might be true, but at the same time, I don't know who I've got right now a ton of faith in the Eastern Conference that I think that, they'll never make it back to this level because of these teams in their way. Boston's dealing with something pretty significant with what they're going through. Cleveland had the best record in Eastern Conference, and they didn't even make it to the conference final. They got bounced in the second round. So, and then of course you got the Knicks, who, their season, the way their season ended, they don't even have a coach. The draft is in a couple days. They don't have a coach. So, there's a lot of uncertainty in the Eastern Conference. And you're right. We don't know ultimately what's going to happen with the Pacers. East is as wide open as it's been really long time because I told you before we came on, you kind of laughed about it, but I'm going, did this potentially, if you want to suspend reality and let's just have some fun for a second, play fantasy basketball and think the Sixers have everybody healthy for once. Who's got a more talented group right now, because here's the thing, you're not going to see Tatum till the
Yeah.
you're not going to see Haliburton. Okay,
Yeah.
so who's got a more talented top of the roster than the Sixers if those guys are healthy? Because I mean, I think as we sit here right now, you Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey are going to be healthy at the start of the year. I mean, you kind of know that. Well, how long it'll last, who knows with that group? But wow! And now, what does this do to Milwaukee's thinking about trading Giannis?
Yeah.
Does this change their metric with that? With what's going on with Indiana and Boston and New York? Some of the instability with New York. So it's become really, really interesting now. What's going on in the East?
Yeah, I think if you look at it, and I see some people saying, "Hey, all their guys are locked up under contract." I have their salary sheet right in front of me. I know that they are, other than Miles Turner. My point is, 2 years in the NBA these days is a long time, and you just
Yep.
don't know how things evolve in a 2 year period. So it is possible they come back and pick up where they left off 16 months from now. I just think that's asking a lot. I think they'll be different in some way. Maybe great as well. I'm just saying this version of the Pacers felt like they could run it back next year and kind of keep the momentum going. And now it feels like they'll probably be pretty different by the time they're back on the court together. But you are right that the big story here to me is the Eastern Conference now. There's got to be teams that are rethinking whatever plans they were making going into the offseason. Orlando made a big move. I think they're feeling great about their big move now.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
it's like, yeah, we're glad we didn't slow play this. We went all in. We have a great shot next year. The Knicks felt like they were so far away. We got to fire our coaches. That I wonder if the Knicks are looking at it and saying, "Hey, man, I don't know. We're right there. And now there's one less contender." So, and then to your point, the 76ers, I don't know if I can go that far, man. I just don't know. We'll have to see it. But all these other teams,
that's surprising to me, man. Like, why? Like, they're going to start the year healthy, and they've got a great coach. I mean,
here's why. Here's why,
okay,
Legs.
Go ahead.
Injuries were devastating this year across the NBA. And I just think here's what I believe about the NBA. The game is played at a faster tempo. It's more spread out. There's all these threes being shot. So defensively, you have to cover more ground. I just think more players are going to be injured with soft tissue injuries, groins, hamstrings, calves, and Achilles. Those injuries are up. And so I think that expecting that 76ers team to make it through 82 games and then to make it through 4 rounds of the playoffs to me just feels too far-fetched for those guys.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, look, to me, I think if you're the Sixers, you're sitting there right now based on the year that you just had, and you look what's going on in the Eastern Conference, I think you feel a lot more hopeful than you did 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Clearly, Orlando, with the trade that they made and bringing in exactly the type of player that they need, they're really, really interesting. Look, we didn't even mention the Pistons. What a year Detroit had, and they've got a legitimate star, man. They've got a guy to build around in Cade Cunningham, a guy that
Does
gives
it
a chance
change their offseason? Do they look at this and say, "Hey, maybe we don't need to, take another year to grow. Maybe this we make 1 or 2 moves we weren't expecting. We could be the in the finals."
Now, what do you think about it? Do you think this in any way changes the way Indiana approaches this summer? Or do they just go, listen, man, they obviously need another ball handling guard because you can't just put all this on Nembhard and McConnell.
Yeah.
So you need another ball handling guard, but do you make a real serious attempt to upgrade that spot over what you have right now that's healthy to stem the tide for a year until he comes back? Or, that's 16 months away before we see that guy in an NBA game again. I just don't know what, and it's probably too early for them. Kevin Pritchard probably wouldn't even have an answer, man. Think about how tough that is for them. So not only you lose game 7, you lose him. And now the draft and free agency is all going to take place in the next 10 days. And this just happened to you. So, you don't even have time to process what's going on with this guy. And you got to go into this. They're always going to try to improve their team. Of course, they're always, but this is different. This is more than just add a piece to what we already had, a finals team. This is totally different. So you're right, man. It's fascinating what the Eastern Conference is going to be. I mean, there's some teams in the West that got a lot of question marks too, and a lot's going on there, obviously, as well. With that trade that was announced the day of Game 7 was pretty incredible with Kevin Durant. So you've got going into next year. I think there's one certainty right now, in the whole league, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yep. Even the Cleveland Cavaliers legs, maybe they were going to blow it up. Their season didn't go quite as their postseason didn't go the way they want, or it's a flawed roster. I think they even have to look at the roster now and say, maybe not. Maybe just run it back and hope for a better break in the playoffs, because there's just not that much competition. And then I look at teams like Toronto, who have been rumored to be aggressive. Miami's always aggressive. There might be teams that are just a little more inspired to go for it this offseason in the Eastern Conference because of how open it feels. The last thing I want to ask you, Legs, though, and we could make this our FanDuel segment of the week. I know we usually do shout-outs, James. This is sort of a shout-out, I suppose. It's really just presented by FanDuel here. Remember, you can get started with 150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/AllNBA. But what I want to ask is, the Celtics won last year, and to me it felt like they were in line to repeat. Not that it was inevitable, but that they had such great odds because that starting five was so good. They were young and under contract. It just felt like they had a great chance. The year before that was the Nuggets, 16-4, same thing, under contract. They play together, felt like they were to repeat. So this is 3 years in a row where it kind of felt like the team that won was going to repeat. Do you feel that way about Oklahoma City, or do you feel more so than you did about the Celtics and the Nuggets that OKC is primed to go back-to-back next season?
I feel more so about OKC's chances because they're built on defense. There's less fluctuation with that. But at the same time, it's almost like it's at the point I've kind of changed my thinking on this stuff because it's obvious. It's very difficult in this era, probably more than any, to be able to extend your window. These windows are shorter than you think. And it seems like, wow, look at the age of these guys. Look at all the things we just got done saying about them, how great they get along. And they've got a superstar at the top. They're well coached. Like all that stuff is going to change. But it just feels like unforeseen stuff happens. That's what it feels like to me. Something unforeseen happens. But having said that, of all of these teams that you're talking about, it feels a little bit better about this one because of the way that they are built, with that defense being really the driving force. And that's not going to change. That's not going to change. That's their identity. That's their roster. And that's ultimately what they relied on doing a championship last night. So, but who knows, man? It's impossible to predict these things. Certainly Denver did not feel like a one-title team to me. Boston didn't either. And maybe we haven't heard the last of Boston or Denver. Denver still has Jokic, who most people still regard as the best player in the NBA. The Boston Celtics, just not like Tatum's gone forever. You might even see Tatum back at some point late in the year next year. It's conceivable because his injury happened a lot earlier than Haliburton's. And I see people talking about, hey, Hallie can play in the playoffs next year because the recovery from the injury is way better than it's been. I don't think a guy goes the whole season and then makes an appearance in the playoffs coming back for the Phillies.
It'd be tough.
I don't think that happens, man. The most intense part of the season, you drop a guy in from an Achilles injury, but it just seems like unforeseen things happen to these teams, and it's very difficult to keep your roster together. Some of the decisions you make financially because of the second apron and all these things, and luxury tax play into it. You have to make very difficult decisions and let key guys go that were very important to your championship run. And it's hard to replicate what those guys bring sometimes. And before you know it, you find out how difficult it really is, man, to stay on top. So all I say to OKC is enjoy this one, man. And I'm sitting, I could literally, if I could open up this window in my hotel room, I could hit Paycom Arena with a football. It's right there, man. That's where it all played out. Enjoy this. Savor it.
Yeah.
Don't get ahead of yourselves in talking about repeating and three-peating and dynasties and all that, man. Just enjoy the hell out of this. Particularly a city like this that hasn't had one of these parades. I'm guessing that'll probably be on Wednesday. Usually it's on the Wednesday following it. It's going to be quite a scene, man, in OKC.
It is going to be quite a scene. I'll say this about Oklahoma City. Again, their regular season was so dominant. I think their playoffs, though, didn't seem nearly as dominant as either the Celtics or the Nuggets before them. Just in that they had to, 2 game sevens, they were pushed. They didn't offensively, at least they looked like they could be stalled. But I do think they get better from here. This is a team that needed this experience. They still have all those draft picks. They still have toe pitch. They have the ability to kind of shift wherever they need. So to me, I think they get better. And that's why I agree with you that I think their chances of repeating or just winning another one in the coming years is really high. But I will say this, both Denver and Boston, the thing that stands out about the NBA today is 82 games plus 16 at the speed, pace, and spread out and how hard you have to play is really tough. Boston ran out of gas. Denver ran out of gas. Oklahoma City's younger and deeper, so maybe they won't. But that is the one thing that I think you'll see next year is playing this deep into the year and then coming back and having to play this deep into the year next year is really, really, really hard to do in today's NBA.
Agreed.
Physically.
Yeah, no, and the other component we don't know the exact toll that it takes. The off season just being so different for you when you become a champion. And how different it feels. First of all, you played this late, so your rest comes later, which means everything's pushed back. And just the way the demands on your time, the way you kind of carry yourself out, like all that's it's tough to know exactly and quantify that. How different is that feeling? And for an off season, and does that play into sometimes why it's so hard to get it done the next year? We'll see, man. It remains to be seen, but obviously, with the age of this roster, the way they've put it together, the way that they connect with each other, the chemistry that they have, it looks like, yes, this is going to be something, a team and a franchise we are going to be talking about in the mix year after year for the foreseeable future. I think we all feel that way.
The disease of more is the other thing that I think gets teams after they win. And I think in Denver, this actually happened, not necessarily with the players, but with ownership, front office, head coach. Those three kind of all fell out of rhythm after their title, and it's had catastrophic effects to how they've operated the last 2 years. And I think that was the disease of more. I don't know if that happened in Boston as much. I think it was just fatigue and injuries. I don't see it happening with OKC, though, because of all the reasons we just said. They seem to understand and accept their pecking order. And, maybe that changes now that everybody gets a championship and wants to spread your wings, but I don't see it. I just think this is a team it's a new generation, Legs. This is the first Gen Z champion. And they just seem to have a different personality about those types of things where they all seem content to be in the roles they're in.
No doubt about it. It's like, it was funny after the game last night. It was not the typical euphoria, right? Celebration that you're
some of the reports I heard, some of the videos I saw, I was like, my God, man, what is going on with these poor boys? Celebrate, open a beer, spray it around.
Maybe they'll get to that, man. And something tells me some of those guys will know what's going on. I think Hartenstein's probably got a banger planned for this coming weekend. It would seem to me. But
by the way, baby Hartenstein, man, that might have been the shout out
of
the
man.
night. Did you see that? Baby? That boy was passed out.
That his son, when they show him those videos when he's like, a grown man, like this is what you were all about, man. The night your dad won a championship. Pretty funny, man. You can't. It was an awesome moment, but happy for those guys, man. It's a good group of guys, having to cover them all year and be around them and getting to know those guys a little bit, especially Dagnall. Spent a good amount of time with him. You feel good for them. They're good dudes. It's the one thing this series did not have was a villain. There was not a villain in this series, man. There was not that guy that you wanted to watch to root against. There wasn't. They didn't have it. Most years there is a guy like that just gets you emotional one way or the other, man. So people want to tune in and watch because they want a guy to fail. Sometimes that's enough of a reason to watch a series. You want a guy to fail because whatever. He's cocky, or he's talking trash all the time, or whatever it may be. Or he's like, you think he's a little bit borderline dirty defensively. Like, this series didn't really have that. It's just a bunch of good dudes, both teams. It was a little bit different that way.
All right, cue that outro music, James. We are back tomorrow because I don't know if you guys heard, but Kevin Durant got traded to the 2-seeded Houston Rockets. Feels like a big move, and we're going to have to break that down. And there's some other stuff happening, including the Denver Nuggets going very strange with their general manager position. We'll talk about that and whatever else breaks between now and then. It is the season of trades, of the draft, of free agency. And so we're going to dive into that. We wanted to let the season end before we jump into the next one. Tomorrow, the next season begins, and we'll have you, we'll shepherd you through it. Hit that like button for us on the way out, everybody. Legs, get home safe. See everybody tomorrow.
nightmare.